Hey, you got this.
We know you do. We know our goals. We rep ourselves. Confident to our core. Check the score. You can't ignore. We team girls, and we want more. RESPECT. We about it, and we get SUCCESS. You know that's how we spell success. We are Team Hub Girls. Yeah, Dream Hub, Team Hub. We team girls. We're here to play. We team girls. We're here to stay. We team girls. We're here to play. We team girls. We're here to stay. We team girls. And we want more. We used to whisper, now we roar.
Good afternoon and welcome to another Educational Masterclass Online. I'm Olivia Ruello, CEO of Business Chicks Australia. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that video certainly just put a pep in my step. I'm smiling from ear to ear. What a beautiful video by Suncorp. We sure do need a community of confident girls now more than ever. As always, my immense thanks to all of you for joining us live today. What a topic and what a time that we're all living in. And I hope that you all had an opportunity over the long weekend, whether you celebrate Easter or you don't, to spend some time with the people that you love and got to do some quiet things, and we're just still sort of in the moment, and yeah, just did some things that really mattered to you and your families. A new week and another masterclass from Business Chicks. As I've said before, our team is working truly around the clock to try and bring you as informative, inspiring and hopeful content as we possibly can. A bunch of you joined us last week for All Stars, which was such a beautiful event, and we've got more things coming up very soon, so stay tuned to your inboxes. A couple of quick housekeeping things before we kick off and I introduce the wonderful Dr. Jodie Lowinger. If you are joining us live today and you haven't joined one of our masterclasses before, please know that there is time at the end for you to ask questions. So submit your questions on the panel on the right-hand side. I will do my absolute best to get through as many of them as I possibly can at the end. I want to take a moment to just give a very, very big shout out to our wonderful partner, Suncorp Team Girls, for bringing us today's masterclasses. Through their Team Girls program, Suncorp are committed to building a nation of confident girls by promoting the benefits of sports participation. In these COVID times, girls are physically unable to come together and play sport, which, gosh, I remember growing up, netball was my lifeblood with my girlfriends on the weekend. So I know that there's a lot of you out there with teenage daughters who are really feeling it right now for them. Suncorp, as amazing as they are, have pivoted the program to be able to connect girls and their parents via digital platforms to enable them to be active, inspired and build resilience in these difficult times. Through our partnerships like this masterclass series, Suncorp aims to provide parents with practical and useful information to help guide their daughters, because that is the Suncorp spirit. And I want to give a particular shout out to Rach, Gab and Lyndall, because they have completely backed us for so long now, and we're so thrilled to have them on board as a partner. We believe in their Team Girls program enormously. So let's get started on today's masterclass. We know that there's a lot of you out there feeling anxious about the current state of the world, and you're definitely not alone. Today we're going to be hearing from Jodie Lowinger, who is an award-winning clinical psychologist and the founder of the Sydney Anxiety Clinic. It's fair to say that Jodie is an expert in managing anxiety and building resilience, and she'll be talking through strategies to help us all overcome some of the stress that we're feeling and hopefully help us sleep through the night a little bit better. Over to you, Jodie. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's fantastic to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to helping you with some mindset strategies and anxiety management strategies so you can overcome the fear and cope with the anxiety and distress that each and every one of you are potentially experiencing to some degree. We've been thrown into a whirlwind of what is seeming to be a new normal now, where in the context of coronavirus, it's tipping us into a whirlwind of uncertainty. And with uncertainty comes anxiety, comes distress, comes anger, comes agitation, comes frustration, comes despair. So a whole lot of challenging emotions that can get the better of us. And in fact, as far as our brain goes, they're wired to tip us and to take over. So today is about taking charge. Today is about helping each and every one of you to move from this fight or flight or anger and agitation headspace into resilience, into empowerment, into hopeful actions where you can re-engage in your life to the best of your ability in the context that we're in, with mental health, with well-being, with satisfaction, and with success. I am so excited to be speaking with you today, to be able to share my knowledge, both as an anxiety expert, as well as a high performance coach to business leaders. So just to give you some background, thank you, Liv, for that beautiful introduction. I am a high performance coach. I work with people in leadership, in mindset, in resilience, in mental health and in well-being, but also ultimately being the best that you can be professionally and personally. And what I do in this is I'm an anxiety expert and with a background in management consulting and CEO and founder of Sydney Anxiety Clinic. So the reason I talk about that is because what I'm bringing you today is the various hats that I wear to try and help you to feel empowered, to be able to pivot and adapt in this surreal existence that we are all experiencing together. And how can you recognize the emotions that are going on for you? How can you respond to those emotions with self-compassion, with kindness, with self-respect, with love, and with nurturing, both for yourselves and for your loved ones, professionally and personally? How can you engage in a practical toolkit, which what I'm really excited to share with you today is a lot of skills and strategies on how to embrace mental health and well-being in the context of a crisis, which effectively is what we're living with at the moment. What the world is living with at the moment is this global crisis of coronavirus. And how can we take ourselves out of any semblance of fight or flight and distress into adapting and building the certainty into the uncertainty so we can respond with resilience for ourselves as well as our team members within an organizational context, as well as our loved ones in our personal lives. And so the objectives for today is equipping you with some practical strategies of how to manage worry, stress, and anxiety. In doing that, we're going to talk, first of all, a little bit more around what is worry, stress, and anxiety. What is going on in our brain that tips us into this state of agitation or despair or just wanting to escape the whole thing and shut down? What is going on there? Why is it so understandable? And how can we respond to that to feel more empowered, more hopeful, more positive and resilient? I'm going to touch on some practical and powerful mood boosters. And for those of you who have kids and adolescents, how can you be role models of resilience? How can you unfortunate expression, but how can you fit your own oxygen mask to look after yourselves in order to be able to help the people in your circle of influence, whether that's professionally, as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as an employee. How can you support the people around you and recognize, in order to be the best that you can be to the people around you, how can you first and foremost make sure that you are looking after yourselves? That's critically important. We cannot pour from an empty glass. So looking after yourselves is what today is all about, in order to be able to best support people in your circle professionally and personally. So let's talk about this context, coronavirus, horrendous context that we're experiencing, either directly or indirectly. We see the stories on the news. We feel the heartache. My heart is connected to each and every one of you for the despair, the connection in that despair that we're seeing in what's going on in the global context. Some countries experiencing distress to overwhelming, unparalleled levels in particular environments. And we see what's going on around the world, and that takes our mind into a spin of worry. We wonder, what does that mean to us? Will our lives be threatened? Will our livelihood be threatened? And we experience the direct impact of having had to adapt and pivot into this new normal. And it's a temporary normal, that's for sure. I want you all to sit with hopefulness for the future. We will get through this. We will be okay. This will pass. However, for the moment, it's our really surreal new normal. And so we want to build some acceptance around that and say, what can I do in my current context? How can I deal with responding to the challenging emotions that undoubtedly are coming up for you to certain levels? How can we respond and respect and move forward to build the best context that we can build in the current COVID-19 environment? So empowerment is what today is all about. So let's think about the impact, business and personal pandemonium. So in the various hats that I wear, to give you some examples, one of my clients is a CEO of a bank. I was speaking with him and he said he needed to push the go button on the pandemic plan. He said they laughed when they put this pandemic plan together. Who'd have thought we'd ever be having to contend with this? So hitting go on the pandemic plan, what on earth does that even mean? And what it means is probably the impacts that each and every one of you are experiencing to some degree at the moment. So business leaders that I'm working with as their performance coach, HR people, people in culture, performance and culture individuals who have had to recognize the impact of what that means to making sure that you have some semblance of cash flow, to making sure that you adapt in this new normal context. Skeleton structures, being remote ready overnight, having to pare back to your bare essentials, and the impact that takes place on people's lives, on redundancies, on cutting back the hours and the income, and then tipping into the personal pandemonium that plays out for us, for our partners, for our parents, for our children, is questions around what that means to you. And what we want to recognize, as when I'm talking about uncertainty, I call uncertainty our uber threat. It taps into our primitive survival instinct of fight or flight. And the impact of the current context that we're dealing with at the moment is immense uncertainty, overwhelm. Will we go into lockdown? What if my business is threatened? What if my livelihood is threatened? What if my loved ones are threatened? And what if my very life is threatened? And the way that affects us is we experience threat. Now, what I want us to think about there in the threat that we're experiencing in that context of lockdown is the challenge is disconnection. The challenge is disconnection from our work colleagues. The challenge is disconnection from our friends, from our family, from our disconnection from the very life that we know, this magnificent sense of freedom. Now, what we want to do is move from anxiety into action. And I encourage you to recognize this key message of what we're actually dealing with. To be honest, it's disconnection, but it is deep connection. It is connection at the deepest level, because the magnificence of this situation is we are all in this together, and together we will win. So look at, I'm such a proud Australian at the moment. Honestly, I get goosebumps even talking about this, because wow, all of you, we have responded magnificently, and around the world you see people responding magnificently to recognizing that we are all in this together and we are dependent on one another in order to be able to get through coronavirus, to get to the other side as effectively as possible. So take comfort in the knowledge that yes, human beings, for our mental health and well-being, we crave connection. And allow yourselves, if you're in isolation, and some people are experiencing the distress and the agitation and the suffering and the despair of isolation more than others, and please, if that is you, if you're experiencing the real challenge that's going on with having to adapt and be agile in this context, recognize the power of digital, recognize the magnificent work that many organizations, look at what Business Chicks is doing, providing communication, strategies, information, opportunities for connection. Leverage that to recognize that this might be social disconnection from the connection that we know, but part of moving from anxiety into action, into effective, resilient and empowered action, is not focusing our mindset on what is wrong and the elements about this context of what we don't have at the moment, but noticing when that story is taking hold and pivoting, building that self-awareness to say, this is out of my control, but this is in my control. And that's what we're talking about today. So have a think about the impacts that are taking hold for you at the moment. What are some of the professional and personal impacts that are taking place? Let's just build some awareness. I'm actually going to open this up. Feel free to share your thoughts around some of the things that are going on for you, and allow yourselves to recognize that in essence, we're all in this together. We are experiencing things. So if I think about my own life, I have 3 children. So personally, we've had to adapt. We're 3 children, 5 people in the one house, 5 people and 2 dogs. So we have had to adjust our environment and move our furniture out of the way, making sure that we've got space for to do exercise, to adjust and adapt. Having children, having to work from home, having to do their schooling from home. I'm sure people out there, you're experiencing the stress that can take hold when our normal is now a new normal. and my personal impacts professionally, Cine Anxiety Clinic, we've had to move. Fortunately, we were doing Zoom sessions already, but we've had to take that to next level. How can we be remote ready to provide telehealth, digital health to the people who we want to serve, to the people who we want to ensure are getting continuity of care? In my role as a performance coach, how have I had to overnight adapt, pivot? This is best practice in this context. So think about, what are the impacts for you? How can you acknowledge what's going on for you emotionally and practically? How can you build that awareness and adapt and pivot? Focus on what is in your control in those circumstances. So let's think about the issue with uncertainty. What we're dealing with uncertainty is it taps into the very core of our primitive survival instinct, our survival instinct of fight or flight. And if we were to think about the primitive survival instinct, why uncertainty is so challenging in that context is because if we were to be cave people, let's say, where we began, if we think about evolutionary theory, let's say our life was very simple. We would be seeking out things that could sustain us and avoiding our threats, avoiding things that potentially would take our lives. And so if we were cave people and we were to leave our cave, if we can't see around the corner, there might be a tiger there ready to eat us alive. And this is uncertainty. We want to be able to predict our environment. We want to be able to seek out our threats. And so uncertainty triggers this primitive survival instinct because we don't know what's going to happen. And it's like we can't see around the corner. It triggers our primitive survival instinct. So let's think about what's playing out in our brain in this context. We have this part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our thoughts and our beliefs and our perception, how we see the world. Uncertainty, coronavirus. What are some of the worry thoughts that take hold? It taps into what we were talking about earlier, is what does that mean for our livelihood? What does it mean for my job? What does it mean for my children? What does it mean for their schooling? What does it mean for my family? What does it mean for my parents, my grandparents who are more elderly? Are they going to be threatened in this context? And so the uncertainty takes us into this part of our brain. We get hijacked by our amygdala, which, because our brain is responding to perceived threat as if it is that tiger coming to attack us, we get hijacked by our amygdala, which tips us into overdrive of fight or flight, our primitive survival instinct. It's not the enemy. In fact, it's our best friend when we need it. It's incredibly important for our survival in the case of a real threat. And in the context of coronavirus, some of this has been incredibly helpful, right? Over the last few weeks, we've had to go into overdrive. We've had to focus on moving, adapting with agility, with speed. And so what we've done is we've responded, we've had this adrenaline, and it's been a surge. And when we can leverage this, it surges us into practical and effective action. So we want to leverage it, but we don't want to be victims to it. We don't want it to tip us into extreme emotions and an extreme level of unhelpful actions, which is when the fight or flight reaction plays out in an unhelpful way. And let's talk about anxiety in this context. In essence, anxiety is our physiological reaction to threat or perceived threat in our environment. It's this rush of adrenaline and cortisol that's setting up our body to fight or run as effectively as it possibly can. And in many contexts, as we've experienced, we have had to leverage this. So in the case of real threat, which to some degree is what we've had to deal with in the context of coronavirus, this has been helpful to us. But if we're getting hooked into this spiral of worry thoughts about fear of all of the possible things that might go wrong, and in fact, this is potentially short-term worry about our finances, worry about our loved ones, worry about our jobs, worry about our very lives. This fight or flight reaction can be unhelpful and tip us into overdrive. So I want you to reflect on anxiety for a moment. In my work, specializing in anxiety and working with people in either a high performance context or at the Sydney Anxiety Clinic, I consider myself so grateful. I work with incredible people all the time, people who experience anxiety. I help these people to move from anxiety into empowerment, into practical and effective action. And I want you, for those of you who are listening today, who are watching today, who experience anxiety to more extreme levels, or in essence, really, anxiety is part of our common human experience. We all experience anxiety to a certain degree, right? It's part of who we are as humans. But if you experience anxiety, recognize that you care because you care. Anxiety is a superpower. It so often is associated with people with deep thinking minds, this magnificent analytical mind, and a passionate, caring, empathic heart. And what is the very essence of anxiety? Our protective survival instinct. I don't know about you, but the mama bear comes out in me, protecting my cubs, protecting my tribe. You know, that protective instinct, that is our superpower right there. So leverage it. Be proud of who you are, because this is really wonderful qualities. So, but what we want to do is recognize that it can be filled with challenges. Fight, agitation, and anger, aggression. Let's think about what's taking hold, what we're seeing in places like the supermarkets, right? We might have thought, what on earth is that? Well, guess what? This is fight or flight. This is anxiety. This is our survival instinct taking hold, saying, I got to protect my cubs right now. So if that's you, understand where it's coming from, but understand that it can be really unhelpful. What is the flight? The flight is wanting to escape. The flight is wanting to shut down. The flight is over-checking. The flight is getting hooked into worry to try and get certainty. So I really want to get a bit of a temperature gauge on what is going on for everybody at the moment. From 0 to 10, if you think about 0 being no anxiety at all, through to 10 being maximum anxiety, how anxious have you been feeling at its worst over the last week? Let's have a think about what's been going on. I know for myself, my mind has been whirring into overdrive, thinking, got to do this, got to do that, got to protect, got to make sure that everything is okay, got to make sure that my businesses are okay, got to make sure that my family is okay. And how that plays out, if we think about it, adrenaline in our bloodstream, cortisol in our bloodstream, and then we're trying to get to sleep. That's the polar opposite of sleep, right? Our melatonin shuts down. Our oxytocin shuts down, so we want to disconnect. So have a think about what's been taking hold for you. Looking at the poll, okay, so in essence, we're tipping moderate to more severe is our results here. That's a really fascinating mood check that's taking place at the moment. Moderate anxiety to more severe anxiety, some of the reactions that are taking hold for each and every one of you. And that makes sense, right? Because we want to recognize that anxiety is part of our common human experience. So we're all experiencing this to some degree. Very normal, very understandable. Validation, right? Validation, acknowledging how understandable some of these emotional experiences are for you. And moving beyond those and recognizing that there's a fairly large, substantial number of people at the moment who are experiencing really high levels of anxiety, stress, which is an acute representation of anxiety, and distress, fight or flight. Very large number tipping into that more extreme levels as well. So, moving on. So, humans struggle with uncertainty. It keeps us in fight or flight. We're fighting uncertainty, and that's what worry is. Worry is our struggle with uncertainty. So what are some of the worry thoughts that are coming up for you? Awareness is really important. Awareness to be able to get some distance from those worry thoughts and be able to respond with helpful actions rather than unhelpful actions. Have a think about what some of those worry thoughts are. As I mentioned, in essence, a lot of us grapple with the same things because it brings us back to our protective survival instinct. And now let's move from, now that we've got some good understanding and recognition of what's going on and the why behind what's going on, let's move from turning from anxiety into effective action to build mind strength, to help you to get on with productivity and performance, with love, with connection, with resilience for each and every one of you. So today what I'm going to talk about is my Mind Strength 8-step strategy to handle anxiety in a crisis and to move from anxiety into effective action. Step 1, in order to build mind strength, we want to notice the worry story that's taking hold. What is worry telling you? How is that playing out in your mind at the moment? Worry is a futile, unhelpful mental process. We all know it, right? We all recognize that it likes to take hold. It likes to make itself known, yeah? And when we get hooked into that worry voice inside our head, how does it make us feel? Does it make us feel good? Hell no. All we're focusing on are all of the possible things that might go wrong. So notice how that voice in your mind is playing out. What is it telling you? And we know that when worry takes hold, it tips us into fight or flight. So in order to build mind strength, we want to take those long, slow out breaths through pursed lips. Our breath goes with us wherever we go. Yeah, it does. And so recognize this as your superpower. Now, when we're in fight or flight, we've got muscle tension taking hold, taking over our body. So when we're in a crisis or in this elevated state of stress and anxiety, fight or flight, we all hear it, we all know that we've been told deep breathing, right? Deep breathing. But does it work when we're in fight or flight? doesn't really work really well. Our muscles tense up. Let's try it now. If we're in fight or flight and we're trying to take a deep breath, it doesn't go very far. So long, slow out breaths is the key to success here. Long, slow out breaths through pursed lips. Let's all do it together now. Let's give a gift to the universe and let's bring together our collective sense of calm. Okay, I'm going to shut my eyes. I'm going to relish this moment of a long, slow out breath. Okay, let's all do this together. Shut your eyes. Long, slow out breath through those pursed lips. And what we want to do is let our lungs fill up naturally. We build in a pause between the out breath and the in breath and let our lungs fill up naturally. Well done. If you stay with that through, do a few cycles, you are literally going to change the neurochemistry of your brain and build those moments through the day. I call them circuit breakers. Build those circuit breakers through the day. And we want to embrace the power punch of mindfulness. Bring our mind back to the present moment. It allows us to feel more in control, to build certainty amidst that uncertainty in the present moment. Validation, validation, validation for ourselves and our loved ones, okay? And our work colleagues, our friends, our family. This is step 4 of building mind strength. We want to acknowledge our thoughts and our feelings, all right? Validation. As we know, if we respond to our feelings with anger and invalidation, what happens? Does it make us feel good? Hell no. It makes us feel more agitated. If our partner responds to our emotions and says, oh, just get over it, just deal with it, does it make us feel good? Absolutely not. So validation is key to success. And right now, we're all in a context where we're kind of together in close confines, right? So we want to acknowledge the emotions for ourselves, for others, and recognize that these thoughts and feelings are okay. It's about responding to them with self-compassion, with kindness, with resilient actions and empowered actions to tip into not getting angry at ourselves, not building a stigma around experiencing anxiety or agitation, but respond to that to say, this is part of being human. I know I am experiencing this and I can respond to it with helpful actions. And step 5 is, can we sit with the discomfort of uncertainty rather than struggle with the uncertainty? Step 6 is we want to move from worry into problem solving and action planning. Worry is out of our control. Problem solving and action planning in our control. This is the core to the mind strength method, moving from worry into problem solving and action planning. And step 7, we want to engage in powerful mood boosters. Things like, all of you personal trainers out there, I thank you, because the mind-body connection is key to success right here. As we know, for our mental health, we have to be looking after our physical health, our physical well-being. So how can you adjust and adapt your environment to make sure, even though we are socially disconnected and in social isolation to some degree, to a large degree, we've had to let go of going to the gym, of engaging with personal trainers at the moment, but recognize there's so much that's being put out on digital at the moment, amazing quality stuff, exercise and movement, seeing if you can get some natural sunlight, see if you can protect the boundaries within your environment so we don't have this scope creep, slippery slope of our work life encroaching on our personal lives, which is happening all over the place at the moment. with all of the leaders I'm working with, we have to build some boundaries here and embrace mindset strategies to respond with, can we engage in pleasant activities with acknowledging the achievements that we're doing each and every day. These are powerful and effective mood boosters that will bolster your resilience from the anxiety and the stress and the distress that's taking hold at the moment. And seek out the silver linings. Like at the moment, my goodness, I've been saying to my leaders, sometimes we're going to have to look under rocks, right? It's hard for some of us to find those silver linings at the moment. But as we know, an attitude of gratitude, trying to move from threat into seeking out the opportunities and adapting and pivoting to try and find the certainty, find the new normal, adjust to the current context with agility. That is the essence to high performance and the essence to resilience. So see if you can seek out the opportunities to connect. I mean, for me, I typically work very, very long hours. I'm seeing more of my children than I have ever seen before. Well, certainly for a long time. I'm doing online Pilates classes with my daughter. I mean, this is magnificent silver linings right there. So try and find what you can adjust to in this context, in this surreal new normal that we are having to temporarily go through at the moment. Now, for those of you who have kids, what we can do, good segue talking about my Pilates online engagements with my daughter, is how can we find opportunities to connect with our loved ones in this new normal, with our children? How can you practice that magnificent validation of the emotional experiences that they are going through, that your partners are going through, that your friends are going through? How we help our children is typically how we can best support our colleagues as well. Validating their emotional experiences, asking open-ended questions that say, empower them. What would you do? How can I help you? And give age-appropriate information, keeping it quite concrete depending on how old your little ones are. Age-appropriate information. Typically, children will worry more if they are living, existing in a vacuum. So we want to empower our kids, but contain some of that information, particularly the distressing stories, the distressing images that are on the news at the moment. We know how we respond to that and how distressing that can be for ourselves. So see how you can move towards from over-checking into what is the essential information that is really helpful. How can you respond with acts of kindness? How can you look out for those good news stories as well? Be role models for resilience, which means that in order to be able to help others, you must look after yourselves first. So that is a really important key message for today. If you're experiencing distress, be kind to yourselves, respond with self-compassion and kindness. Acts of kindness for ourselves, acts of kindness for others. We know how much science there is to support the effectiveness of these experiences. It stimulates dopamine, it helps ourselves, but also when we can do good things for others, that is such a wonderful mood booster for ourselves as well. So recognize that our mind will tip us to the negatives, okay? That's just the way our brain is wired. Worry will take us to the threats. So be purposeful now. I encourage you, notice what's going on. How can you move from anxiety into practical and effective action and build mind strength? So what I've got a gift available for each and every one of you. If you go to mindstrength.com.au/business chicks, there is a, let's call it a go-to guide to embrace these strategies that we've covered today to help you to feel empowered and to move from distress into resilience, from anxiety into effective action. And I look forward to staying in touch with each of you. Please do feel free to connect with me anytime. It's an absolute pleasure to connect directly. So thank you. I'll now move across to questions.
Thank you so much, Jodie. There were so
Such
many,
a pleasure.
so many wonderful takeaways. When you spoke about mood boosters, I was thinking even that 1 minute video at the start put me in such a different state of mind before this webinar with those gorgeous girls dancing together in the schoolyard. I loved it. So mood boosters can be very short little moments that we can all add into our day. And I remember someone once saying, you know, we need to, as women, start to talk to ourselves the way that we would talk to a best friend or someone that we love, because we can often be very unkind to ourselves. So I think it's important at this time to really acknowledge yourself and how well you're doing. Now, some questions. I've got a question from Mary. She wants to know if you have some tips on communicating your anxiety to less empathetic family members / colleagues. A lot of people are asking similar questions.
Yeah, so how can we communicate our anxiety? Ultimately, this is a challenge because we can't really control how other people respond, right? So we can control ourselves, and this is where the empowerment lies. It is about embracing assertiveness rather than noticing our own fight or flight reactions, rather than tipping into anger or agitation or frustration or distress or passive. We want to be able to be assertive and say, okay, I might not be able to control how other people respond, but I can control how I respond. I can lead by example and be a role model to providing that validation for others. And I can also be in assertiveness, be open to saying, you know what, when we went through this experience previously, what do you think might be really helpful to help me in this moment? So you can empower your loved ones with an open-ended question with your end goal in mind. Because as we know, if we tell other people, what happens? The brick wall comes up. So oftentimes we can get more by facilitating them towards those actions. And then what we want to do is shine the light on desired behaviors. So every time we get a person responding in a way that we would actually like, even if it's a small representation of that, it's like saying, wow, you know what? When you did X, Y, and Z, gosh, that made me feel loved. That made me feel really nurtured and really cared for. Thank you so much. That's how we typically can help move people into behaviors that we would like to see them engaging in.
Yeah, that's so useful because I don't think people always know how to respond. I'm getting a lot of different questions, Jodie, on various habits that tend to manifest when, you know, in times of high anxiety and stress. So Sarah's asking for particularly around any tips on stopping an anxious teeth clenching habit. And some other people are asking about emotional eating. Do you have any sort of advice around what, you know, how do you stop that in a moment? I mean, sometimes with the teeth clenching that could occur overnight when you're sleeping, or what are some of the ways that might be helpful to move through that?
Yeah, these are brilliant questions, really brilliant questions. Liv, do you want me to shut this presentation down or keep it as it is at the moment?
Let's shut it down. A lot of people are asking for your resources and slides as well, Jodie. So just everyone, I'll just let you know that what we will do is we will send out the link that Jodie referenced at the end of the session in our post communication email that gets sent to you all, I believe, by the end of today. So we'll make sure we send as many resources as we possibly can with that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know you were going to come up when I shut it down there. So sorry, back to the questions. Okay, so some of the agitation that can take hold, really that teeth clenching at night is probably your body giving you signs, right? Signs of that adrenaline and cortisol that's building up the muscle tension, which is a physiological reaction to fight or flight. Now, of course, teeth clenching, it might be a sign of an underlying medical condition. It might be bruxism, might be contributed by any number of various things. So we don't necessarily just want to think about the fight or flight. If you're concerned about medical things, please see your doctor to get that checked out. But in essence, the mind-body connection strategies are really important here in order to drip feed that mental health and well-being through the day, to be able to alleviate some of that muscle tension that can take hold at night. Some of the worry thoughts that are taking hold through the day can really take hold at night as well. Your body is giving you signs. I love the question also about comfort eating. This is what's called distress intolerance, when we don't allow ourselves to respond to emotions in helpful ways. We typically respond to emotions in ways where we try to shut down those big emotions. There we go, that's what wanted to see your beautiful face, Liv, that's fantastic. So we shut down those big emotions through various ways. We try to numb those big emotions. We numb those big emotions sometimes through comfort eating, sometimes through, teenagers self-harm. We've got an epidemic of self-harm. That's an attempt to numb big emotions as one of the factors that contributes, but also other more extreme representations. We have got a horrendous suicide epidemic in Australia, in society. So these are all ways to numb big emotions. Comfort eating is one. So we want to recognize it's about saying all feelings are okay. How can I respond to those feelings in helpful ways rather than unhelpful ways? How can I embrace self-kindness and self-compassion and do lovely things for ourselves and engage in things that we know typically are helpful rather than unhelpful?
Sorry, there's so many wonderful questions coming through. It's hard to really distill them all because there's too many. Janelle is saying how she wants some advice on how to not cry when overwhelmed at work, when we're supposed to be in control as a boss, when your staff aren't around you. I think it's okay to cry, but I'll let you as the expert answer that.
Janelle, I feel your pain. This is really, really tough because, hey, we're not robots, right? We're human beings. We're all human beings. And leaders are human beings, This is why I love, love, love the work that I do, because you have to breathe in that stress and breathe out calm, yet you're not robots. So how on earth do you deal with that in the current context? Because, hey, we were finding an anxiety epidemic before this, let alone the current context. So let's lean into recognizing what courageous leaders are, right? Let's lean into what magnificent, amazing people like Brene Brown typically say around it is not about being perfect in order to be okay. It is about saying all feelings are okay. And yes, we want to be putting on a brave front to the best of our ability in order to be able to give out that sense of calm. However, if we're imperfect, what we want to do, and it's the same as how we would want to respond to our children, to say, you know what, this is incredibly tough. This is really hard. I'm feeling frazzled right now, but I'm not going to allow this to get the better of me. And I am looking after myself. I'm responding with all of these fabulous practical actions. And I would love you as my team, as my organization, to be moving out of the fight or flight headspace into practical, effective resilient, and empowered actions. So when I'm working with organizations, this is all about building a high performance culture within the workplace. Being courageous leaders is not about being robots. It is about looking after yourselves and embracing imperfection and talking about those stories. You know, Microsoft, Google, it's all about building a growth mindset culture within your workplace. But yes, it's tipping us into emotion, perhaps at a more extreme level at the moment.
And I think that people, particularly if you're a leader within an organisation, your team connect to your sense of humanity right now. You know, like I think that there's such a common humanity, you know, everyone's experiencing similar things. And, you know, I think being a little bit vulnerable at times is very different to not being emotionally regulated, but being a little bit emotionally vulnerable just shows that, yeah, like, I'm a human, like you said too, and I think that that's okay. Just Bianca's asking Jodie if you have a what your view or opinion is on the impact of sugar consumption on anxiety. I know a lot of people are reaching for the chocolate right now. Do you know, like, what's your opinion on anxiety and sugar? Is that too big a question to ask right now?
While it's an interesting question, it's probably outside my area of expertise, because, you know, this is something that people have an abundance of expertise to talk to. So what we want to do is think about, you know, everybody responds in different ways, but in essence, we want to think about, am I looking for the quick fix? And is this something that is aligned to heart-driven action for me, or am I trying to shut it down, right? We know that when we try and shut down big emotions, we get bigger emotions. And that's a similar kind of question about the comfort eating. So, hey, we all, like, I love chocolate, right? I mean, some people don't like chocolate, but, you know, typically being kind to ourselves, we want to embrace imperfection. As an anxiety expert, I work with a lot of people who are pretty high on that perfectionism spectrum, and when we try to be all or nothing with things, we recognize that it's hard to be all, so then we have these rebound effects. I could talk for hours on these amazing questions. I just want to come back, Liv, to the question about the emotional dysregulation. I think it's actually, there's an important addition to that question, and thank you, you touched on it in the words that you said. Whilst we want to recognize that it's not about being robots, if you are finding that you are experiencing emotional distress to the point that it's out of alignment with how you typically would like to be, and you are finding that you're teary a lot, or you're agitated a lot, or you're anxious a lot, please don't feel like you are a failure or flawed, or feed into this stigma around anxiety and depression. Please seek out the help of a mental health professional. Doesn't have to be in the anxiety clinic, you know, it can be so many people out there, right? Clinical psychologists are so well trained in some of these strategies to turn these problems around quickly. So build that self-awareness and seek out the help you need, whether it's a mental health expert or a coach. Please do seek out the help that you need.
Can you, we've got literally 1 minute left, Jodie, do people need to contact their GP? If someone needs help right now, do they contact their GP first, or what's the first step in terms of getting the help that you need?
GPs are a magnificent gatekeeper of care, so certainly contact your GP. Your GP, if you're tipping into this anxiety and depression or whatever it might be, even if it's low mood, they will be able to diagnose what's going on for you, issue a mental health care plan, which will enable you to get Medicare covered sessions, a rebate. We are at the Sydney Anxiety Clinic, we are remote ready. We are helping people around the world at the moment. So please do, the GP is a very good gatekeeper of care, but you can also go privately. But certainly I love GPs. I mean, they're a phenomenal, amazing resource. So yes, there's a whole world of help, but you can engage directly if you choose to.
Great. Really good advice. That's all we have time for today. Dr. Jodie Lowinger, that was truly brilliant and so insightful. And I hope everyone's leaving with their shoulders a little bit less loaded after that session. So thank you. Truly grateful. Our next masterclass tomorrow, just change of gears, our next masterclass tomorrow will be with the wonderful Rachel Corbett, who is talking about how to start a podcast. As always, you can register for masterclasses at businesschicks.com, and of course, they are always free for our beloved premium members. That's all from me today. Thank you for joining us. Please be gentle and kind with yourselves this week, and we will see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.